Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
In our politics lead today, President Trump today condemning racism, bigotry, and white supremacy, though he made no acknowledgement of his own rhetoric, which even former White House staffers and Republican members of Congress have called racist or racially divisive. This after two mass shootings left 31 people dead, a death count that grew today by 2. A source telling CNN that the president has also ordered his team to come up with possible proposals, a few of which he laid out in a speech earlier today. But after suggesting background checks for gun purchases may be a solution, in a tweet, the president stayed away from any mention of gun laws in his spoken remarks today and instead focused on this.
Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun.
CNN's Boris Sanchez picks up our coverage now from the White House.
President Trump with his first significant remarks following this weekend's 2 mass shootings.
These barbaric slaughters are an assault upon our communities, an attack upon our nation, and a crime against all of humanity.
Reading from a teleprompter, Trump zeroed in on the El Paso suspected gunman's alleged motive, outlined in a racist, anti-immigrant screed posted online moments before the attack.
The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate.
But the president failed to mention the accused shooter mirroring some of his own language about immigrants.
This is an invasion. That's an invasion. Invasion. We have a country that's being invaded.
The president's use of invasion on camera and in tweets echoed in the alleged gunman's manifesto, where he refers to a Hispanic invasion, despite him writing that Trump didn't originally inspire his views.
Our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America.
Trump's speech also laid out several policy ideas to address mass shootings, but didn't mention gun control measures like background checks, a noticeable change from his tweet just a couple of hours before when he wrote that Congress should pass strong background checks, perhaps marrying them with desperately needed immigration reform. Instead, Trump on camera repeating Republican talking points, tying mass shootings to social media, mental health issues, and violent video games.
Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun.
And advocating for the death penalty and so-called red flag laws.
We must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms.
Jake, the National Rifle Association put out a statement praising President Trump's remarks, saying that they welcome the president's call to address the root causes of the horrific acts of violence that have occurred in our country. No mention in this statement of the background checks that President Trump alluded to in those tweets, but failed to mention in his speech, Jake.
All right, Boris Sanchez at the White House for us. Thanks so much. So let's chew over all this. And Alexander, let me start with you because President Obama just gave what I think it's fair to call a fairly pointed, even if he didn't go after Trump by name statement. Let me just read part of it. We should soundly reject language coming out of the mouths of any of our leaders that feeds a climate of fear and hatred or normalizes racist sentiments. Leaders who demonize those who don't look like us or suggest that other people, including immigrants, threaten our way of life. At this point, why not mention President Trump if that's who it's aimed at?
I mean, I would agree. I think President Obama is trying to toe the line of, making sure that we're uniting the country, because it's a really incredibly scary time right now. I don't think anyone, as much as they want to say thoughts and prayers or whatever, has an answer, because the reality is that politicians on both sides have really failed the American people, right? We have not adequately solved gun violence in this country. And so I think it's important to name what needs to be named, but also highlight that America does not have a monopoly on racism and sexism and bigotry. But what we do, and what is unique about the United States from the rest of the world, is our access and ability to have just so many weapons of warfare that are, in American hands and on the street. So I think, Barack Obama was, again, trying to toe that line of inspiring people, but also needing to, condemn and say what needs to be done.
And Bill, a new Washington Post op-ed says this, quote, "You can't be mourner-in-chief or healer-in-chief when you've spent your entire political career stoking the hate and championing the white supremacy you now decry." Obviously, they don't think that President Trump, in their view, can fill the role that people want a president to fill.
Yeah, I think we're long past him filling that role. I mean, I suppose if he had actually taken some responsibility, it didn't have to be exclusive responsibility, but it said, a lot of us have said things we now, at this moment especially, that we regret. I have too. He doesn't have to say he's the only one. He can leave it somewhat vague, but he had to take some kind of personal responsibility after his performance over years, obviously pre-presidential and presidential, but especially the last few weeks, which has just been a torrent of abuse of, send them back, and Elijah Cummings in Baltimore, and then, gloating about the robbery of Representative Cummings' house, and then everything else. I mean, so it makes it, I think his speech was perfunctory. President Obama's statement was awfully good. I voted against him twice, and I don't regret that. I would have preferred John McCain and Mitt Romney's policies, but that was a presidential statement. We're not going to get that kind of presidential statement or leadership, I think, from this president, which does make it important for others to act, I do think, or others to step forward and speak. I do think, actually, there's a case for Congress coming back. Maybe the Senate won't pass these different gun control proposals. I don't think it's enough for Nancy Pelosi simply to say the Senate should come back. Maybe the House could come back, too, and they could both do a little bit of attempted governing, at least, at this moment when the country needs to see some responsible behavior from elected officials.
I will say that there's H.R. 8, which is literally sitting on McConnell's desk.
Right. We're going to talk about that later in the show. So hold your horses on that.
But on the reaction, and you mentioned President Obama's comments, which I think were very good, very appropriate. But I think he struck a tone that some Democratic candidates didn't. When you hear Beto O'Rourke or a Cory Booker really going after the president, basically saying he's racist and he's encouraging and inspiring this type of acts of violence, I think that's just preposterous and irresponsible. Look, I've been critical of the president's comments in the past. I don't think they help create an environment of consensus, of an environment that is constructive. But there's a lot of hate, unfortunately, on both sides. Now, the president is the president. He's the head of state, head of government. He has a responsibility. He's made some statements in the past that have been offensive. But to call him, a white nationalist and that he is responsible for this, I think is totally irresponsible. And I think it's too early to make that type of comment.
I think it might be unproductive. I don't think they're off. We've talked about this before. White nationalists identify him as white nationalist. Now, is it productive? No.
But it's the time to do it, isn't
it? It's always a time to call out what needs to be called out. I think trying to whitewash it or sweep it under the rug is not helping either. The problem is, as Tupac says, Trump is a reflection of his community. There are too many people who believe as he does. There are too many people who are not willing to step up for gun reform. The NRA doesn't have power just because of money. The NRA has power because it has voters who are not convinced that any of the things that you talk about, both parties have failed, that any of the things that are in the House and the Senate are the answers to the problems of gun violence.
It is Tuesday, the 6th of August of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Just a small dash of a hint, a pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. And if you happen to have the Spanish paprika, it works equally as well. Some people say that it may even be superior only because there's not as much. Only because there's not as much. Rarity doesn't necessarily mean it's better, but it certainly is equal. Indeed. Well, hell froze over. Trump condemned white supremacism. He said that the sinister ideologies of white supremacy have no place in America. So I called the White House, and there is no comment on whether Stephen Miller is self-deporting. Well, yet. I think we may still be able to convince him. I don't think there's much convincing that needs to be had. You know he wants to go wherever Breivik considers to be a white paradise. And you know where that is? Yeah. Uh-huh. They didn't call it the White Army way back in the day for nothing. Now, did they? Yep. And it may not be as cold as it used to be. No wonder they want climate change to be ignored. Heat up the earth. Melt all that stuff off the Siberian tundra. Not knowing it's going to let the methane gas escape and everything will be, dead. But that's what happens when you let the master race take over. Jeez. Yeah, I don't really know how sincere Trump is. I mean, there were some people like Norah O'Donnell who just swooned. I think that she was seeing starbursts. I don't know what it is about that gal, but let me tell you. She thought that Trump finally became presidential. Every time he gives a lead and teleprompter speech where he can't even remember the right city names, people like Norah O'Donnell say, "Oh, he was so presidential." Yeah, well, you got to be pretty damn stupid to think that now, don't you? I was accused of calling every Trump voter a racist. Because if you call Trump a racist, that means you're calling every voter a racist. And I just reminded them you're either racist or you're anti-racist. There's no such thing as not being a racist. And not one of them will ever answer the question. They accuse me of being a hate-filled monster because I just want people to get along. Yeah, I'm a hate-filled monster because they hate having to get along with those people. Well, whoever those people are, tend to turn out to be our people. They do. They're called neighbors. Now, do we really want to have the balkanization of our own neighborhoods? Do we really want to do that? Come on. I know historically one could go down through, American urban sociological developments and see the demarcations between, well, if not ethnic lines, certain national lines within boroughs and neighborhoods. And one could argue that there was a type of balkanization in that. But I'm talking about the America where you have this really nice front porch, no front fence or gate. Hi, neighbor. They walk by, wave at you. Hi. Welcome. Come on in. Everything was out in the front, and then everybody started moving into the back and ignoring their neighbors. And the next thing you know, everybody's got a gun because they're afraid. Video games, mental illness, the impersonalization of America due to those endeavors and behaviors is the reason for all these mass killings? I blame the backyard. Okay, all of this, I won't say all of this has to be put on Trump because this programming has been going on for a considerable time. Right around the time LaPierre took over the NRA. Surprisingly. Many people are saying no one knew. I love it when he says that. This is the first time he ever heard it, you know. No one knew that the sky's blue because it's refracted sunlight. It's like a prism effect. No one knew that. Well, they wanted their president to be president, and they got him. And now it looks like we're going to be in more than just a trade war with China. They're rattling their sabers, and we will get into a little bit of that in the at the chef's table later on. Maybe we should go ahead and continue on with what we have here curated. I mean, we could just riff on the events of the day and personal stories about the garden and the cedar and plum trees being very well trimmed. I really like this couple that came in and did the trees. They were excellent. But we actually have a curated show. And, of course, at the top, that was CNN acknowledging Obama's statement urging Americans to reject language coming out of the mouths of any of our leaders that normalizes racist sentiments. Which is interesting because then Trump was saying, we have sinister ideologies, white supremacy, blah, 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 blah. And, essentially saying racism is bad. And then he started attacking Obama because that's what he knows. He's a bigot and a racist. Let's be clear. All right? It's not one or the other. It is both. On the rest of the menu, Steve Scalise. Yeah, that's a little me Mussolini. I'm serious. I am not kidding. He even called himself David Duke without the baggage. I think you're an idiot, Scalise. You got more baggage than David Duke has. Well, he spent yesterday, all day, ignoring the weekend's mass shootings to smear Democrats with ugly lies about supporting murder. A bipartisan group of 28 lawmakers are redoubling their efforts to stop Trump from going to war with Iran. Yeah, at least there's some people with reasonable brains on their shoulders. And Putin is threatening to develop new nuclear weapons if the U.S. does it first. Oh, no, wait. We already have. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where North Korea has funded its weapons programs with over $2 billion in hacked and laundered monies from banks and cryptocurrency exchanges. And China threatened severe countermeasures if the United States deploys intermediate-range ground-based missiles on its doorstep. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. One time I aspired to be a francophone, but alas, it was not meant to be. But a francophile. Oh, yes, indeed. I am that. Very, very, beaucoup, beaucoup. And one might argue that I might have been brainwashed into believing that Paris is truly the center of the universe. I fought that, so I did. Look, I come from America. A center of the universe? I mean, maybe that's New York. Or maybe that's Montana. But the idea that Paris could be the center of the universe, and if you don't believe it, they'll let you know what they think about you not believing it. and it's even worse in Paris. So I guess one could argue that I was brainwashed into finally believing that Paris is indeed the center of the universe, and that might have been all the brainwashing that took place at the Louvre, the Musée d'Orsay. Too many art galleries, too numerous to be able to list them all. Oh, and cafes, zinc bars. Yeah, I got brainwashed there too. Yeah, with the French 77. Where do you think I learned it? The most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails, by the way. And when Blue Moon Spirits Fridays comes up, we always feature the French 77. Okay, well, if you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link right over there with the social media scroll, because we believe in order. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our Patreon link, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. You know, if you could afford, like, the cost of a French press coffee, just some sort of espresso type coffee drink, if you could afford to pass those funds along to Netroots Radio once a month, we have 8 years of experience in resistance radio and stretching dollars. Yes, we do. Your generosity has allowed us to resist all these 8 years as the founders originally intended, all those many, many, many decades ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so easy. Just go to @NetrootsRadio, and Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. If you would like to follow me, it's @JusticePutnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And then during that 10-minute period, which in the industry is known as the scramble period, I try to get those links out on social media. So, maybe it's a little bit over, but it's okay. We have like a, little interlude there before the actual beginning of the show. Though that's the actual beginning of the show, because it all melds. It melds. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, go to Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Yes, they're all out there. Whatever platform you like, it will be there. Dan Desai Martin brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. As the nation mourned the tragic mass shootings over the weekend in El Paso and Dayton, Louisiana's Steve Scalise, that little mini Mussolini, he's got the jaw for it, too. He's just really tiny. But I got to tell you, Mussolini wasn't a big guy either. The House Republican whip quickly turned on Monday to spreading lies about Democratic House members, because that's what these little mini-me Mussolinis do. Mussolini was involved in journalism of sorts, kind of like the Murdoch of his day. But he had a better jaw. That's why he went further. And look how far he got. Well, Scalise addressed the tragic shootings by lamenting a, quote, culture of death in America today, end quote, and blaming the partisan nature of Washington, going so far as to say that the talking points and name-calling in support of narrow political agendas only further divides our country. What did Goebbels say? Blame your opponent for what you do. And if you're going to put it into the modus operandi called the big lie, capital B, capital L, do it over and over and over again. Scalise had abandoned concern on Monday morning about mass shootings and was focused instead on promoting misleading talking points and name-calling to support his own narrow political agenda, as if his work in addressing the horrific shootings was done. Scalise spent the next several hours calling on Democrats to hold a vote on the absurdly named Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, an unnecessary bill promoting a myth that infants are born alive and then murdered by doctors after botched abortions. There is no evidence of doctors engaging in such practice. But, they found the evidence in the basement of Comet Pizza, where all the kids were being sexually abused by Hillary, Podesta, and all the rest of those devils. That's where they're getting their info, folks. And now they're trying to pass bills predicated upon evidence they found in the basement of Comet Pizza. In fact, people went there and shot up Comet Pizza. Remember that? Oh, by the way, it only took 2 Scaramucci's for everybody to forget about Gilroy. That was an aside. Notably, Scalise did not call on Congress to take any actions to stop the epidemic of mass shootings that are a problem in this country. He did, however, highlight the inflammatory and baseless attacks on Democrats by his Republican colleagues. Well, on and on it went with Scalise, the second most powerful Republican in the House, retweeting baseless accusations that Democrats are in favor of murder, all to promote his radical anti-abortion agenda. And Scalise is as radical as it gets. Earlier this year, he bragged about his time in the Louisiana legislature when he voted for an anti-abortion bill requiring rape victims to have babies. Yeah. Well, look, he's a Mussolini mini-me. Scalise is also very proud of his A-plus rating from the NRA. He even voted against a bill to provide universal background checks for all gun purchases, a common sense measure supported by more than 95% of Americans, because when you are washing NRA laundered Russian rubles, you do what Vlad says, not what 95% of the Americans would like. While Scalise's response to the weekend's shootings were to condemn name-calling, he refused to condemn Trump's racist attacks against members of Congress last month, calling on his Congress to vote against a resolution to hold Trump accountable for his ugly rhetoric. And now look at the manifesto that guy in El Paso had. Like the rest of his party, Scalise ignored calls from around the country for congressional leaders to do something to address gun violence. Instead, he focused his attention on a problem that does not exist, attacking his Democratic colleagues with the kind of ugly and hyper-partisan smears he claimed only the day before to oppose because Goebbels said, "Accuse your opponent of what you do. And if it's the big lie with the capital B and the capital L, do it over and over and over again." Robbie Gramer of Foreign Policy magazine brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. 28 lawmakers from both the Republican and Democratic parties are pushing legislation to ban the use of funds for military action against Iran without congressional authorization, according to an internal letter obtained by Foreign Policy magazine. Similar legislation has failed before, but lawmakers are hoping they can fold this into a must-pass defense policy bill expected to be finalized in the fall. Well, if it gets through the Senate, where everything that a Democrat might have their name attached to goes to die. Does anybody remember who's in the Oval Office right now? Okay, just saying. The letter represents the latest political battle to pare back Trump's ability to wage war without congressional authorization amid mounting fears that the Trump administration could stumble into a conflict with Iran. Do you think? The new push sets up a potential showdown over Iran policy in Congress that will play out during negotiations over the final defense policy bill, the National Defense Authorization Act. I don't know. Build schools. That's what I like to see happen. In Washington's hyperpartisan atmosphere, this campaign by some lawmakers to reassert Congress's role in constitutional decisions over matters of war stands out as an anomaly. Well, everybody said that damn commie Eisenhower was standing in the way of the military-industrial complex taking over our government and our way of life because everybody needs a job. It worked for the good Germans, and it would have worked better if they really knew what they were doing. Nuts and bolts and wrenches don't cost that much money at Ace Hardware, and they even donate to the RNC and to Trump. It is championed by both liberal Democratic critics of Trump, including New Mexico Senator Tom Udall and California Rep. Ro Khanna, and staunch Republican supporters such as Matt Gaetz. Wait a second, Matt's is going against Hefeuer. Oh my God, does he know what's going to happen? Opponents of such legislation, including Arkansas, Republican Senator Tom Cotton, have argued it would restrict Trump's ability to quickly respond to threats from Iran, meaning it's going to be a first strike, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm serious. They're going to try to serve Trump Tahdig, and Trump will think it was something else, and he pushes the button. Well, in June, Trump ordered, then abruptly canceled at the last minute, a military strike against Iran, which many experts fear would turn into a regional firestorm. Do you think? I'm telling you. Don't even think about serving him any Fessenjun. Don't. He will push the button, not knowing what it is. I just presume everybody knows what Tahdig and Fessenjun is. Now, Tahdig is the crusty part of the rice at the bottom of the rice cooker or pan in which you're cooking your rice in, and it is considered to be quite a delicacy. It is quite good. Persian rice by in and of itself is very good, but the crusty, what some people would call the burned part, you don't get it burned, you get it golden brown. The Tahdig, and that goes so excellently with Fessenjun, which is pomegranate chicken. Yeah, he'll push the button. He won't know what the hell that purple is, because that's the kind of guy he is. All right, Dee Parvaz of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The salon that tries harder? What? Russian President Vladimir Putin said that his country would start developing new nuclear missiles if the United States began doing the same. This is essentially what non-proliferation advocates and activists feared after Trump pulled the U.S. out of the INF on Friday. Okay, that was 4 Scaramucci's then. If Russia obtains reliable information that the United States has finished developing these systems and started to produce them, Russia will have no option other than to engage in a full-scale effort to develop similar missiles, Putin said in a statement having called a meeting with his Security Council. He called on Russia's intelligence service, as well as foreign and defense ministers, to maintain close monitoring of U.S. weapons development, like they already aren't. They know what we're doing, and we're developing new nukes. Separately, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabakov on Monday said that Moscow would take corresponding steps to defend itself against missiles the U.S. might station in Asia. Deploying missiles there is an idea favored by new U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper. Oh, you mean that lobbyist toady for the military-industrial complex? And he would just love to sell these weapons of mass destruction, because when they get destroyed, you got to have people buy more. I guess they don't know that sometimes something bad might happen where they're making their stuff. It's happened before. I'm serious. There were world wars. I watch like the History Channel. Sometimes these History Channels is like, all war, all the time channels. Should the Pentagon get the budget it requested in the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act, the U.S. would in fact be moving forward with developing 3 new missiles banned under the INF. While the weapons are conventional, not nuclear capable, Russia can dispute the validity of those claims, just as the U.S. often disputes Moscow's claims about its missiles. The U.S. and NATO have accused Russia of violating the INF with its developments of its ground-launched cruise missile. Russia insists the range of the missile is within the limits of the INF and that it's not nuke-capable. Yeah, it only goes 5 miles under the limit. It's right there. We're legal. So far, the Senate has passed its version of the NDAA and is working on the appropriations bill to fund the request. The House, however, has passed both its version as well as its appropriation bill, denying the $97 million requested to start developing the 3 new missiles. Except for one thing. Do you know and remember who's sitting in the Oval Office right now? And I'm not just talking about Stephen Miller. Okay, let's get on with our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? But did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. New Zealand once had a Dr. Seuss-worthy assortment of birds. Take the giant moa, a flightless bird twice as tall as an adult human, which weighed more than a sumo wrestler. Then there was the Haast's eagle, the largest eagle ever known to exist. It hunted the moa. But as the story often goes, then came humans. First the Maori about 700 years ago, and then European colonists a couple hundred years ago. And both sets of people drove many of New Zealand's unique birds to extinction. Many of the surviving species today are now threatened or endangered.
So you have species like the kiwi, the kakapo, kea, the kaka, the takahe, all with nice Maori names, but all in danger of going extinct.
Louis Valente, an evolutionary biologist at the Natural History Museum of Berlin. Valente and his colleagues used genetic data to build a tree of New Zealand's living and extinct native birds. They then used a model to estimate how long it took new species to emerge, which allowed them to assess humans' bird-killing habits on an evolutionary timescale.
in a couple of centuries, humans wiped out 50 million years of evolutionary history. So the little impact that we think we have is actually having repercussions for, millions of years.
The analysis is in the journal Current Biology. Looking ahead, the scientists say it could take another 10 million years to recover species that are currently threatened or near threatened if nothing's done to save them. But it's not all doom and gloom.
The conservation efforts that are being done in New Zealand at the moment are actually quite pioneering, and they've been quite successful. So I think we are still at a position where we can still prevent lots of million years of evolution from further being lost.
As the ecologist Aldo Leopold said, to keep every cog in wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwan is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-hee. I've been talking today with Seung-hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
What does Donald Trump mean by a safe third country? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Migrants from Honduras and El Salvador who survived the perilous land journey to the United States' southern border have gone through Guatemala. Trump insists that those migrants must be denied the right even to seek asylum in the United States unless they have filed for asylum first in Guatemala. The problem? To be returned to a third country, not the country the person came from, not the country they're seeking to migrate to, the United States, there needs to be a, quote, safe third country, end quote, agreement between the United States and that country. And the United States and Guatemala don't have such an agreement. Trump says, well, yes, he does. But the highest court in Guatemala says, no, he doesn't, because the Guatemalan Congress hasn't approved such an agreement, nor have virtually any other countries for that matter. And Guatemala isn't remotely capable of even considering these applications. And critically, Guatemala is not remotely safe for these migrants because the reach of the gangs and the violence they are fleeing is long. Indeed, the United States State Department says that violent crimes such as murder and armed robbery and extortion, other violent crimes and gang violence is rampant in Guatemala. Trump has designated Guatemala as a safe third country. It's not. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that stages across New York City went dark. Actors' Equity went on strike against the Producing Managers Association. Up until that time, stage actors often faced poor working conditions. They had little protections from being fired, often had to pay for their own costumes, and were rarely paid for rehearsal time. Equity members decided to go on strike. They demanded rehearsal pay, an 8-performance week, and holiday pay. That night, 12 productions were canceled. One was called Lightnin'. Unable to resist the play on words, the cast members hired a bus with a banner reading, "Lightnin' Struck." The striking actors received support from the stagehands and musicians. On August 18th, a week-long series of benefit performances were put on for the striking actors, kicked off by a parade. W.C. Fields served as the MC. Actor Brandon Tynan adopted a speech by Mark Antony from Julius Caesar for the occasion. friends, brothers, sisters, countrymen, lend me your ears. Behind us, we have more than 5 million men and women. The ship of hope, the American Federation of Labor. Now, dear public, our great public, will you stand up and show that you are with us and join our cry, equity, equity, equity? The strike continued and expanded to theaters in Chicago. Finally, after 30 days, the producers agreed to negotiate. The theaters had lost $3 million in revenue, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, they signed a 5-year contract. And with that, the curtain dropped on a successful equity strike. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit, going for a high again in the mid to upper 90s. Might even be a bit warmer in some of those unprotected areas. Currently, the winds are light and variable out of the southeast. Will pick up as usual to their 5 to 10 mile per hour clip, but will have shifted out of the west northwest, and then will decrease in velocity tonight to being light and variable, and then pick up again out of the same direction, west northwest, at 5 to 10 miles per hour tomorrow. And we do have some increasing chances of rain in the days coming ahead, moving up to right now, we're looking at 40 to 50% possibility of rain on Saturday. We'll see how that goes. Things always change. That's a long time from now, as you know. Let's see. Grass pollen is moderate. The air quality index is in the good range, though it has gone up to 48 parts per million, where it was considerably lower than that just a day or two ago. That daytime UV index is very high at 8. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.76 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 70%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 75 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 67 with a heavy rain and a flood warning. Wow, that's a lot of rain. Rome is 92 degrees and sunny with no heat advisory. Wow. Kiev is 78 and fair. Kabul is 90 degrees and fair with a heavy wind. I bet. Hong Kong is 82 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 85 and fair. Sydney, Australia, in the dead of their winter, is 48 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California, in the dead of their summer, is 54 degrees and cloudy. And New York, is 77 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Al Nichols of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. North Korea has generated an estimated $2 billion for its weapons of mass destruction programs using widespread and increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks to steal from banks and cryptocurrency exchanges, according to a confidential UN report seen by Reuters yesterday, Monday. Pyongyang also continued to enhance its nuclear and missile programs, although it did not conduct a nuclear test or ICBM launch. That was by independent experts monitoring compliance over the past 6 months on the UN Security Council. The North Korean mission to the UN did not respond to a request for comment on the report, which was submitted to the Security Council Committee last week. Oh my! They were drafting more love letters to Donnie. As long as he gets the love letters, everything's okay. Anyway, like what Donnie said, they weren't talking about those missiles. The Security Council has unanimously imposed sanctions on North Korea since 2006 in a bid to choke funding for Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistics missile programs, and the Council has banned exports including coal, iron, lead, textiles, and seafood, and capped imports of crude oil and refined petroleum products. But Donnie and Kim Jong-un met 3 times, most recently in June, when he became the first sitting U.S. president to set foot in North Korea at the DMZ between the two Koreas. Because they weren't talking about these missiles. They were talking about putting some caps on some other missiles, not these. Especially since Donnie did get the love letter in time. When asked about the UN report, a U.S. State Department spokeswoman said, "We call upon all responsible states to take action to counter North Korea's ability to conduct malicious cyber activity, which generates revenue that supports its unlawful WMD and ballistic missile programs." And are we off the record now? Okay, we are? Oh, good. Could you tell Brad Pascali how he can do that?
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Michael Martina, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. China threatened countermeasures if the U.S. deploys intermediate-range ground-based missiles in Asia, and warned U.S. allies of repercussions if they allow such weapons in their territory. You want a trade war? We're going to rattle our sabers. We'll show you what a trade war is, you puny little young civilization. You're up against one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Do you think we're going to let a mere merchant tell us how to run the world? You have another thing coming. Well, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said on Saturday he was in favor of placing ground-launched intermediate-range missiles in the region soon, possibly within months. You want a trade war? We'll rattle our sabers too, before you do. Washington formally pulled out last week from the INF, a pact with the former Soviet Union that banned ground-launched nuclear and conventional ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges of 310 to 3,400 miles. Okay. Well, it looks like rattling sabers in a trade war. What could come of that? The mind reels. the mind reels. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.